we had some technical difficulties with the company that publishes 5 More Minutes, which sounds way more technical than we are, but that's what happened to our delay. Also, sometimes I totally forget to do this because during COVID, I almost constantly feel like I'm forgetting something. My strongest encouragement with respect to that, if you have anxiety, if you can sense your anxiety, is an article called "The Discomfort You Feel is Grief." Many of you don't experience anxiety. It's different emotions for you. I still think that article is helpful, but not what we're going to talk about for our 5 minutes. I've been dialoguing with a friend who lives several states away, a new friend who has relatives at my church, and a sermon from 2 weeks ago about inviting Jesus to help us interpret and integrate our pain is essential both to daily joy and to the Christian life. And as we've dialogued, what's happening is she believes me, and she's trying, perhaps for the first time in a while or ever, and it's incredibly unsettling and difficult. And so I want to attempt to coach those of you that are willing and able to invite Jesus into the healing of your past, which is interpretation and integration. So I'm going to give much more specific advice than I normally do because the gospel of Jesus is not advice. It's news that changes everything. But after it changes everything, we are invited into so much joy. And a significant part of that joy is the healing of the past things that have happened to us. Some self-inflicted, some circumstantial, some by others. So here's my advice. Go ahead and make a list. And if making a list is hard, then make a list chronologically of light and medium things that still trouble you. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2009. That is not what I started with in the times that I have given energy towards the healing and interpretation and integration. Healing, which is interpretation and integration of my past. Began a process of going into my past for this about 10 years ago, and it's been extraordinarily helpful, clarifying, freeing, joyful. But you do not start with the hard stuff. I do not think it's wise. Some of you are gung-ho like me. Like if you ask me a straightforward question, I will give you a straightforward answer about anything in my life, unless it somehow involves confidentiality, right? And yet, better to start with some small examples and some medium examples. And I would even say go one at a time. And so my friend is in her 70s, and it will take a long time. And so I might encourage her to take one thing in her past per week or per month. The Holy Spirit is certainly not limited to our practices around this or our tactics, but our sense of the felt joy that comes from Jesus' interpretation and integration is greatly increased. But you cannot start with the hard things. If you're looking at a divorce, don't start there. Start with a fight, perhaps. And it doesn't even have to be related to that. I think we dismiss things that happen to us when we're young, and oftentimes something that many would not call traumatic still functioned traumatically in our lives. Like a moment that we were alone with a doctor and it was scary. A moment where a teacher frightened us, legitimately or illegitimately. And if you're taking these as examples of parts that make up a whole, it's going to sound like the most tedious and long-suffering project in history. But if you take it the way I mean it, which is as examples that can lead us into an invitation that the Holy Spirit very actively integrate and interpret the things that have happened to us and the things we did and the things that others have done to us. So the purpose of this sermon series is very basic Christianity. Invite Jesus' healing into our past, his guidance into our present, and that our lives look more and more like kingdom lives in the future. The second sermon and the third sermon are much easier to swallow for most of us. But for those of us that are challenged by the first one, that we can receive interpretation and integration, which equal healing, Start small. Start light even. Don't start heavy, and maybe don't even start medium, but definitely don't start heavy. So those are my thoughts, and they are absolutely worthless if the gospel is not true. If Jesus didn't come to earth, teach about the integrated with God life, where our past is healed, where our present is guided and protected by him, and our future is eternally, unstoppably secure.